Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world. And so much love to you. And I just hope wherever you are, you're doing marvellously well. I appreciate all my listeners so very much. And a big hug to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing well. And go and get that cup of coffee, that cup of hot chocolate, or maybe that fizzling, sparkling glass of wine. And let's continue with part 3 of our story tonight. And it's very exciting because an old woman was found lying at the bottom of the stairs, obviously deceased. But the question is, she phoned her daughter up in the middle of the night in terror. So what was it that scared Julie Warrington? Well, we are about to find out. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's continue with part 3 of our story tonight. Did you happen to speak to the coroner about the cause of your mother's death? I asked Ivor. Yes, I did, as it happens, Ivor admitted. The coroner told me that my mother was in remarkably good shape for a woman of her years, but the fall down the staircase had been deadly for her. It twisted her neck at an odd angle, and she died instantaneously. She assured me she wouldn't have felt a thing, not suffered at all. I just hope she's right. I can't bear to think that she could have been in pain of any kind and be lying there helplessly at the bottom of the staircase, unable to call for help. I don't want to think that that is possible. I'm sure your mother didn't feel a thing, especially if the coroner told you that, I assured Ivor. I'm sorry, Ivor, I don't mean to bamboozle you like this. I know you probably don't want to talk about your mother right now because it hurts. But she was also my friend, and I need answers as to why she died in the way she did. Why there was a baseball bat at her side. It certainly suggests she was frightened about something. And I don't mean to harp on the same ground over and over again, but you didn't say what scared her. I was feeling a little frustrated that Ivor seemed to be avoiding my question. I wondered if it was deliberate, if there was something she was possibly hiding from me that she didn't want to share. Oh, you must forgive me, Cara. Didn't I say? Well, when my mother called me, I couldn't help but feel that she was being rather delusional. Do you know, after that bout of flu, she's not been quite the same. I think she was emotionally quite fragile. And when you're like that, and perhaps she might have been delirious as well, who knows? You can hallucinate, can you not? See things that are not actually there. And it certainly didn't help that my mother's eyesight is not what it used to be. Julie may have been many things, Ivor, I agreed. And yes, I will admit that bout of flu knocked her for 6. But I definitely don't think she was delusional. Definitely not. Whatever scared her when she phoned you, well, it was real, not something she made up in her head. Your mother wasn't like that. Julie listened to my words soberly, but she shook her head. You don't understand, Cara. I'm almost embarrassed to tell you what my mother told me during that call I had with her. Only because it sounds utterly ridiculous. Preposterous, actually. I don't know what was going on with my mother at the time. She's normally, as you say, totally composed, well put together. But when she called me that night, she was all over the place. I've never known her to be so intimidated like she was. What did she say to you exactly? I asked, silently pleading to myself that the journalist in Ivor wasn't going to brush over what really happened, because I could see she was thinking about whether she should tell me what Julie had shared with her on the phone. And I knew all too well that journalists are so good at twisting the truth. Everybody knows that, unless of course they're living in a fool's paradise and believe everything the media tells them. And I certainly never have done so. All right, I will tell you, Ivor suddenly agreed. My mother told me she'd been in the kitchen preparing her evening meal that night, which she'd been cooking over the hob. Bertie became ballistic at one point. He began to bark like crazy, was scratching frantically at the kitchen door, as if he wanted to go outside. My mother was making chops, cabbage and potatoes for dinner. Bertie's incessant barking made her nervous. She glanced out of the kitchen window rather nervously. and that was when she saw something staring at her through the window, with its nose smudged against the pane. She was glad the house was locked from the inside. She was terrified this thing she claimed to have seen could get in. She kept saying to me, "It's not human! It's not human! Oh my God! It's not human! It's staring at me! It's tapping the window! It's giving me a manic grin! And Bertie is going crazy!" Of course, I could hear Bertie in the background, barking furiously. So something certainly had set him on edge, which verifies that my mother did see someone, as, you suggest. Although, again, what she saw is completely debatable. It was unnerving for me to hear my mother in such a panic, of course. I told my mother to please calm down, to relax, to breathe slowly. But nothing I told her helped. She was breathing heavily down the phone, gasping for breath she was. She kept saying to me, "You don't understand, Ivor. It's after me. I know it is. It's after me. You have no idea." "What did she see exactly?" I asked. Well, she told me it looked like a man. But it wasn't a man. She said it was not human. It was a ghostly white colour, its face like a skull, with skin covering its head very tightly. It had sunken eyes and no ears. It looked spindly, long and thin. She claimed it must have possibly been about 7 foot tall. She said it looked like a human that had been stretched like a piece of chewing gum to become long and spindly. She claimed it was grotesque and the most terrifying thing she'd ever beheld. And she said he was evil. I know he's evil. The look he gave me, it's predatory. I don't know what I'm going to do. I think it's after me, Ivor. That's what my mother was saying. I couldn't believe how articulate she was, being in such a panic. But she kept saying, "No, please, God. No, don't let it get into the house. What am I going to do, Ivor, if it gets into the house?" "Good Lord," I said. "That sounds dreadful. What did you say to reassure her?" I asked her if she'd been drinking, because I wondered if she had. She got quite affronted by that, of course. "I haven't been drinking. Why don't you believe me? I haven't touched the stuff in years, Ivor, and you know it. You think I'm drunk, don't you? You don't believe a word of what I'm telling you. But I'm telling you, that thing is out there. It's after me, I know it is. I can't see it right now, but I can hear it, thumping around the property. It's banging at the windows. I know it's going to come back. It's out there. Bertie is still barking manically. He can sense it." I told her that maybe she'd been mistaken by what she thought she'd seen. I could hear Bertie barking, so I knew something was there. But what it was, I do not know. My mother was insistent it was this pale human-like thing with a skull-like head and sunken eyes. I'm sorry, Cara. I know my mother is normally level-headed, but I can't explain to you how panicked she was. I don't think what she saw was real. I stayed on the phone with her to try and reassure her, to calm her down. At one point she was breathing so heavily because she'd been running up the stairs while on the phone to me. She told me she was going to get a baseball bat to protect herself against this demonic creature. I kept telling my mother to call the police at once and then to call me back, and I would remain on the phone with her until they got there. And that was when I heard Bertie had stopped barking, and my mother completely calmed down after that. "Mum, are you all right?" I asked her. At this point I was beside myself. I was far too far away to come to her help, much as I wanted to. I only wished I had called the police on my mother's behalf. I'm so angry with myself that I didn't. I'm sure they'd have walked with her around her property and assured her that all was well and that nothing was there. "Oh, I'm fine," my mother told me. "Everything's going to be all right now. Perhaps I overreacted after all. You know me, Ivor. Sorry, I didn't mean to worry you. I probably shouldn't have called you all the way in Florida. I think Bertie scared the thing away, with all his barking. I can't hear it around the property any more. It's not tapping at the windows or anything. I think I heard it running away into the woods." I could hear the relief in my mother's voice. She kept saying, "It's gone, it's gone." But I promise you it was there. You've got to believe me, Ivor. It was there. It was hideous, absolutely hideous. "Ma'am," I said to her, "whatever you saw, I'm not happy that you're alone in the house. Promise me you'll call the police right away, so they can look around the premises with you to assure you all is well." I told her that I'd get to the house as quickly as I could, and would stay with her for a few days. She said that would be wonderful. She couldn't wait to see me. When we ended the call, she had promised to call the police. And like a fool, I believed her. But my mother didn't call the police, and I know why. "Why do you think she didn't call the police?" I asked. Ivor rolled her eyes. "My mother wouldn't want to tell them what she told me, because they probably wouldn't believe a word of it. They would think she was a silly old lady making things up in her head or going completely senile. My mother was proud like that, you see, and if I was struggling to believe her story, the police would be all the more cynical, I'm most sure." "I don't know why she didn't call me. I've told her she can phone me at any time all the day and night, especially if she feels nervous or something. And she promised me she would, but she never did. I mean, I could have told my mother to go around to the house to check she was all right. She could have even come to our house to stay overnight with us if she was feeling uneasy. She's dead now. I can hardly believe this has happened. She was such a great friend to me. She might have been 60 years my senior, but we had so much in common. As I keep telling you, Ivor, she was like a grandmother to me, and now she's gone. Whatever that thing was that scared her half to death, it must have come back again. She probably panicked, and that was when she fell down the staircase. It's so tragic that her life had to end like this." "I know it's unfortunate," said Ivor. "I told my mother a long time ago to sell her old house and move to Florida, but she wouldn't listen." "But Ivor," I explained, "your mother loved this old Victorian house of hers. She told me herself she wanted to die on the property, so at least she died on her own terms. That's the one good thing that happened out of all of this. She'd have absolutely abhorred the idea of moving to a retirement home or a village. She valued her independence greatly, and probably in a retirement home she wouldn't have been able to keep Bertie, and she loved Bertie." "You do believe your mother saw something, don't you, Ivor?" I asked her. "I don't know, Cara. I wish I could answer that question for you. You must remember my mother's been very sick of late, and maybe she was taking medications that can make you slightly delusional. I have no idea. Cough syrups and stuff like that. And it doesn't help that my mother's eyesight is not what it used to be. She rattled around in that old house on her own. And I want to tell you, Cara, I grew up in that house. It was notorious for making the most awful noises. I mean, the pipes would rattle during the middle of the night. You'd hear footsteps and things like that. It felt haunted, let me tell you, although I don't believe in such things. But as a girl growing up in that home, I definitely believed it was haunted. I often had trouble getting to sleep. I'd actually rush upstairs and sleep between my parents because I'd be so scared. So I couldn't personally stay in a house like that on my own. And as you say, it's brave of my mother to do it. But who knows, she might have heard something, might have seen something or thought she saw something when maybe she didn't see anything at all. Or maybe there was someone on the property. Maybe a poacher was on the premises or something like that made Bertie get excited. It could have even been a wild animal, who knows? My mother thought she saw someone, when in reality it could have been anything or anyone. But this white creature she described, I'm sure she made the whole thing up in her head. It's easy to do, especially if you're on medication, and I'm sure she was taking medications. I mean, what my mother describes to me sounds like something you'd see in a Stephen King movie, I rather think. I mean, for all I know, my mother might have woken up from a nightmare, and the nightmare might have been so lucid she thought it was real. Perhaps her behaviour made Bertie bark. I don't know what was going on with her head, you know. But Julie told you what she saw very clearly, and for the record, I believe her, Ivor, I really do. Look, Cara, my mother was old. She was in poor health after her flu. Goodness knows what was going on in her head at the time. I nodded my head, pretended to agree, although I did not. I knew Julie Warrington had seen something. She was not a woman given to idle fancies, nor did she ever become alarmed easily. She was one of the most sensible, pragmatic people I ever knew. I could see, of course, that Ivor had inherited her mother's resolute stubbornness. She seemed to have her own inflexible opinions of what her mother had seen that night. So I decided not to discuss the matter further with her, as I'd probably end up beating my head against a brick wall in exasperation if I did. Time had gone by so swiftly. It was almost impossible to believe that Julie was gone from my life, like a wisp of smoke, and that I'd never see her again. I wrestled with the nauseating feelings of great loss. I missed my friend. I often pondered about what she'd actually seen that night. I told my parents I was sure I'd seen a white face peering at me from the woods when I'd gone off to Julie's house that fateful morning, and was met with a horrifying scene, when I discovered her deceased corpse lying at the bottom of the staircase. I'm telling you, I was struck with an incongruous sense of foreboding when I approached Julie's house that morning. Something was seriously off. I felt as if something menacious was watching me from the shadows. Maybe I saw the same thing Julie saw that night. The thing that made her lose her balance on the staircase. The thing that caused her to fall. Sweetheart, I'm sure that you didn't see anything, nor did Julie for that matter. The imagination can be very, very deceptive, you know. It's very suggestive. And let's just say in the dark shadows you can make things up in your mind that aren't really there. I've done it myself before. It can easily happen. So you think Julie Warrington was making up what she saw that night? Is that it? I snapped, unable to hide the obvious annoyance in my voice. I certainly didn't appreciate the fact that both my parents were exactly like Julie's daughter Ivor, and putting down Julie's paranoia that she had experienced that night, down to her being alone in a large, noisy house, and feeling distinctly vulnerable after her flu. I think Julie believed she saw something, my mother had said, but it doesn't mean she actually did. Something might have been there, of course, a wild animal approaching the house, even a person, perhaps, wandering around the property. But there is no way she saw what she told Ivor she saw. I don't believe that for a second. Things like that do not exist in our reality. They absolutely do not. My mother believed that Ivor was right, and with Julie's failing eyesight, she probably had seen something, but it was not what she had described, as Julie didn't always wear her glasses, and when your vision is distorted and impaired, a bin bag on the sidewalk might look like a large dog. My father, who was sitting at the table at the time, looked somewhat thoughtful. He nodded his head somberly and said, "Well, maybe Cara is right, and there was an intruder on Julie's property that night. But maybe not the intruder Julie thought it was. Perhaps it was a man looking to rob a frail elderly old lady living on her own. You hear stories of people like that all the time, picking on vulnerable folk. Someone might have been thinking it would be easy to rob Julie, and maybe Bertie succeeded in scaring them away. That's probably what happened. It was a good thing she had a large dog on the property, but it's a dreadful pity she was so insistent on sleeping upstairs. Then she might not have taken that unfortunate tumble down the staircase. The woman was clearly afraid that night, and when you're in a dreadful panic, you don't always watch what you're doing or where you're going. You're caught up in what they describe as the flight and fight response, aren't you?" Despite everyone's misgivings about what Julie claimed to have seen on that fateful night, I knew that Julie had seen something, and it was probably her fear response that had led to her untimely death. After Julie died, Ivor asked me if I wanted to keep Bertie. I knew Julie would have wanted me to take care of her beloved dog, and I loved him as if he was my own anyway, so adopting him was the most obvious thing for me to do. I did my research on what it was that Julie Warrington could have possibly seen that night, and I believed, after my research, that Julie had an encounter with a creature called Slenderman. Many people claim to have had such encounters with this bizarre, idiosyncratic creature. The description that Julie gave her daughter that night fit the description of Slenderman to a T. I understood from the knowledge I gleaned during my research is that there are many cases of people all over North America who have physically encountered Slenderman, most commonly when they're out on their own, driving in their car on a lonely, sequestered country road, usually in the middle of nowhere, without a soul in sight. It is people in these fragile scenarios that are more vulnerable to being targeted by this maliciously vindictive entity that preys on the most fragile among us. There were reports of Slenderman jumping on the roofs of people's cars and trying to break through the metal to get inside the car, as if this obnoxiously malignant creature wants to abduct, harm, or even kill the lone driver. People who have encountered Slenderman usually do so at the dead of night, during the witching hour most commonly, and these encounters almost always occur in isolated, lonely locations, usually in woodland areas. People who've been unfortunate enough to encounter this malignant entity have described being overcome with a paralyzing fear and a sense of imminent doom and foreboding. It is as if they believe that this encounter will likely lead to their imminent demise, which is what I believe Julie Warrington felt that night. The article I read described Slenderman having a pale face, long, lean, spindly body with white tentacle-like arms. The creature is described as having supernatural powers, with a tendency to stalk and abduct its prey, which are usually people. After Julie Warrington had died, shortly after Ivor had put her mother's old Victorian house on the market, it had been purchased by this horrible neighbour of ours, Mr. Biggerstaff, and the cantankerous, unlikable man got very upset with my dog Bertie. Unfortunately, after Julie Warrington's death, Bertie would often trot back to the old Victorian house next door, which had been his home for many years. He'd start scratching at the front door, wanting to get in. Sometimes he entered the house when the door was open, and would be found sniffing around the staircase where Julie Warrington had breathed her very last. It was almost as if Bertie was looking for his beloved owner, even though he probably did know she was dead. But for some reason he needed to go back to the house to reassure himself that she wasn't coming back. Mr. Biggerstaff thought my dog was a dreadful nuisance. He was tirelessly complaining about Bertie. I had explained to him, as best as I could, that Julie Warrington had been Bertie's owner until she died, so it was natural for my dog to go back to the property from time to time, as it was familiar territory to him. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Biggerstaff," I had tried to explain. "Bertie must have slipped off to your property. I didn't see him. But you must remember your place is like a second home to him. He lived in your house with our previous next-door neighbour, Julie Warrington, for 5 years. And without a dividing fence between our two properties, how can Bertie possibly know he's trespassing?" Mr. Biggerstaff had roared at me indignantly. "Your old next-door neighbour is dead," he snapped. "If you inherited her dog from her, you should watch over him carefully and make sure he doesn't cross the boundary between our two properties. I don't want him wandering around on my property, scratching at my front door, and even walking into my house and whimpering at the staircase like he does. It's not acceptable behaviour. If I had my way, I'd put a gun to his head. If owners can't look after their dogs properly, they shouldn't have them in the first place. That's what I say." Mr. Biggerstaff had frowned at me furiously, and the cushioning of flesh underneath his chin had jiggled in indignation. At the time I had looked at Mr. Biggerstaff in horror, suspecting that he really would like to put a bullet in my dog if given half the chance. I didn't doubt that for a second. I had seen him chase Bertie off his property, furiously waving a stick at him and screaming blue murder at my dog and telling him to get away. Bertie didn't like Mr. Biggerstoff one bit, even though he seemed to always want to go back to the old house, as if he was still mourning Julie's passing. Bertie wisely kept away from Mr. Biggerstoff, sensing the contemptuous man could not be trusted an inch. I could not understand why Mr. Biggerstoff possessed so little compassion. My golden retriever was a sweetheart, and everybody who met Bertie loved him. Occasionally he wandered off onto Mr. Biggerstoff's property, like some of the deer did from the woods. But while Mr. Biggerstoff was accepting of the wildlife hanging around on his premises, if he saw Bertie wandering around the woods or sniffing near his front porch, he'd blow up in a tangent. I had a funny feeling that Mr. Biggerstoff's anger was not really directed towards Bertie, but was an inner expression of a boiling anger within himself that he wanted to take out on someone else, and Bertie seemed to be the ideal target for him. Mr. Biggerstoff's burly figure came rushing into view. He was dragging his leg quite badly. I drew in a deep breath to steady myself, as I braced for myself for another confrontation with this odorous man. What did I do to deserve such an obnoxious next-door neighbour, I wondered? And what had Bertie done now? I tried to keep my eye on Bertie, who usually remained devotedly by my side. But occasionally he did slip off next door, and there was nothing I could do to stop this idiosyncratic behaviour of his, unless I locked Bertie in the house, and I couldn't do that. Bertie growled when I heard Mr. Biggerstoff ramming his fist against the front door. The sound was very disturbing, and had I heard that unfriendly knock in the middle of the night, I would definitely have thought the Grim Reaper was at our front door. My mother at the time was working at her computer in the study, and when she heard the knock she called out, "Will you get that, Cara, love? I'm busy at the computer." "All right, I'll get it." "Oh, Mum, it's Mr. Biggerstoff." "Not him again," my mother grumbled. "Why doesn't that man leave us the hell alone? What does he want this time?" I didn't answer my mother, but sashayed over to the front door and opened it cautiously. Bertie growled at Mr. Biggerstoff, and he lay in front of me in a protective stance, as if he was protecting me from our grisly next-door neighbour. Bertie was a sensitive dog like that, and instinctively sensed that Mr. Biggerstoff was a very unlikable character indeed, that certainly could not be trusted as far as you could throw him. "Hello, Mr. Biggerstoff," I said innocently, trying to appear friendly. "Is everything all right? You're not here to borrow a cup of sugar, are you? I think we've got plenty in our store cupboard." Mr. Biggerstoff glared at me through his piercing, cold, dark eyes that hinted of no friendliness at all. He looked particularly dishevelled that morning, and what was left of the receding grey on his head was standing up in greasy tufts. His unshaven face was dappled with a grey shadow, as if he hadn't shaved for many days now, and I certainly got a whiff of stale sweat in the air that smelt like a cheesy pair of sneakers. It certainly wasn't a pleasant smell. I rather suspected Mr. Biggerstoff hadn't showered for days on end. His red T-shirt seemed particularly crumpled, almost as if he'd slept in it. It rolled up his stomach, which was so large it protruded over his pants in white folds of girth that peered at me from beneath his T-shirt. Mr. Biggerstoff pointed a furious finger at me. "You think I'm stupid, don't you, young lady? I know exactly what you did last night, and you're lucky I didn't call the cops on you. I saw you wearing that hideous Halloween costume, and you didn't fool me for a second. You wouldn't stop staring at me through the window and tapping the window pane. I knew it was you at once. I know exactly what your game is, young lady. You're so predictable. I can read you like a book. You're trying to scare me away from my property, aren't you? So I sell my home. But that's not going to happen. You're just trying to get your back on me because I don't like your dog, because his behaviour is obnoxious. I don't know what the hell is wrong with your generation. Kids these days aren't right in the head, and the stunts you pull are stupid. But then again, I suspect you're not desperately bright. Most kids are clueless, spending their lives glued to their smartphones. Is it any wonder they have nothing upstairs in their heads? In my generation, we actually knew how to apply our wisdom. But you clearly don't. Sorry, Mr. Biggerstuff. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't spend my life glued to my computer, I'll have you know. And I'm not a kid. I'm almost 19 years old. I didn't do anything last night to scare you. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even own a Halloween costume. And even if I did, I wouldn't wear it on any other day other than Halloween. It is true, Mr. Biggerstuff, I don't like the fact that you're mean to my dog, and that you keep blaming him for going over to your property, when Bertie means you no harm, whatever you may imply. But I certainly didn't try to scare you last night, just to spite you, just because you're angry with my dog. I wouldn't do that to you. And I don't appreciate being falsely accused, Mr. Biggerstuff, for doing something I didn't do. Mr. Biggerstuff snorted at me contemptuously. You're good. You almost had me fooled there. You're a masterfully proficient liar, aren't you, young lady? I know the type. You don't fool me for a second. Next time you trespass on my premises in the middle of the night, wearing a hideously white Halloween costume, with a skull-like face and grotesque sunken eyes, I promise you will deeply regret it. I'm no idiot. I shan't be putting up with your nonsense a moment longer. That dog of yours is a liability, and so are you, young lady. I certainly was most unfortunate moving next door to such disagreeable people such as yourselves. People like you refuse to take any responsibility. It's your dog's fault that he keeps coming onto my property. I have a right to complain about it. Your dog should stay where he belongs and not roam around at will. Lucky for you, young lady, I didn't go to the cops to report what you did last night. I certainly believe they'd take a dim view of you trying to scare an old man such as myself. And with that, Mr. Biggerstuff turned around and limped away. What on earth was he talking about, I wondered. He had claimed I deliberately tried to scare him during the night, describing me as being dressed in a white Halloween costume, with a skull-like face and hollow eyes, when I had done nothing of the kind. Was the man completely delusional, as well as obnoxiously deranged? Or was he just intent on stirring up trouble, just because he could? What was all that about? My mother asked, as she entered the entrance hall, glancing towards Mr. Biggerstuff, who was marching back home, limping with his right foot, his fists pounding in the air. Good Lord, look at him! I heard him screaming at you. The man is appalling. He looks outraged, doesn't he? What did Bertie do this time? He wasn't scratching his door again, was he, leaving claw marks all over the wood? I did tell Mr. Biggerstuff I would take care of the damages myself. I told him he could send me the bill. So what is his problem now? I sighed. I don't think you want to know, Mum. Oh, no, what has Bertie done? Go on, tell me. It's not Bertie, Mum. It's me. I'm the problem as far as Mr. Biggerstuff is concerned. His complaints were about me this time. Why on earth was he complaining about you? What have you done? Well, he says I was wearing a Halloween costume last night and looking at him through his window and deliberately trying to scare him to death. He thinks I'm doing it to get my back on him because he's always complaining about Bertie. My mother looked quite stunned. You didn't do that, did you, love? You wouldn't, would you? You wouldn't play games with a nasty man like that. You wouldn't know what you were taking on if you did. I know he doesn't like Bertie very much. But my advice is you leave him well alone. Don't mess with a man like him. Ma'am, I can't believe you've just said that. What are you trying to insinuate? I said defensively. I did not dress up in a Halloween costume, or a sheet or anything like that to scare him. I wouldn't mess around with a man like that. I'm not stupid. I haven't got a death wish. Good, I'm glad to hear that, love. Mr. Biggerstuff is a cantankerous, miserable old man. And you don't fight fire with fire, because then you get an inferno. Do you understand what I'm saying? I couldn't believe my mother would entertain the ludicrous idea that I would have had it in me to scare Mr. Biggerstoff. But I kept my mouth shut on the matter. That night when Bertie was lying at my feet on my bed, he sat up abruptly and began to growl. "What is it?" I asked Bertie nervously. I reached out with a hand to switch on my bedside light, so that my bedroom was filled with an injection of soft light that wasn't too bright to hurt my eyes. I knew something was up, as Bertie had never got my attention in the middle of the night like this before. I wiped away the sleep from my eyes and cautiously tipped over to the window, peering through the curtains. It was so unlike Bertie to bark for no reason at all, especially in the middle of the night like this. Was someone out there, I wondered? I could see a flash of light and realized it was an ambiguous, shadowy figure with a torch, and they were moving around our property. Goodness gracious, I could hardly believe it. We must have had an intruder, I thought. And then I recognized the figure. It was Mr. Biggerstoff, as in the moonlight I could see he was dragging his right leg at an awkward angle. It was ironic the cantankerous man had told me not to trespass on his property, but now he was doing it on ours. It was like that neighbour of ours had double standards. Mr. Biggerstoff continued to flash his torch around our property. He was looking behind bushes and trees, as if he was looking for something. What on earth was he doing, I wondered? His unorthodox, irrational, rather peculiar behaviour was exceedingly strange as far as I was concerned. In the light of the moon I could make out his dressing gown. Finally, Mr. Biggerstoff, after looking around our property, for some time it would seem, he began to limp away into the dark shadows, and that was when I decided I would chase after him and ask him what the hell he thought he was doing, wandering around our property at the dead of night like this. It would be the quintessential opportunity to get my back on this obnoxious man who thought he could do no wrong. I couldn't wait to see him explain away his absurd behaviour to me. I threw on my sweater over a pair of jogging pants and pushed my feet into my sneakers, throwing them on as quickly as I possibly could, tying them into double knots so they didn't come undone easily. I put a leash on Bertie, who seemed both pleasantly surprised and thrilled to be going out of the house at this unusual time. I decided keeping him on a leash would be the right thing to do in the circumstances, for I didn't want him running up to Mr. Biggerstoff and giving the game away. I wanted to surprise Mr. Biggerstoff, get him off guard, so to speak, to see what he had to say for himself. I felt quite animated at the prospect of wiping the contemptuous, smug-like smirk off Mr. Biggerstoff's face. I could see myself saying, "Hello, Mr. Biggerstoff. Fancy seeing you out here in the middle of the night like this, trespassing suspiciously on our property, behaving so furtively. Would you like to tell me what you're doing? Before you answer, I'd like to remind you of how often you're so quick to accuse my dog Bertie of trespassing on your property, when my dog knows no better, because the boundaries between our properties are not discernible to a dog. But to you they are. You know very well you've stepped on our land, without our permission, at this ungodly hour of the night. I thought we had an intruder, and I'd have called the cops had I not realised it was you. Would you like to explain yourself?" I could imagine Mr. Biggerstoff shifting awkwardly on his feet, looking rather like a deer caught in headlights. The man needed putting in his place, and I was going to do it, with a great deal of satisfaction, I might add. So there we are. That is the end of part 3 of our story. Part 4 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.